What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 113 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two, sometimes three best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by a totally different cast of people than I am normally joined by on this show. This week, I've got two very special guests for us for the odd three-person episode of this podcast. Of course, I've got Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy.
And then joining us today, Patreon producer, Mr. Zaid.
Just so things aren't different. Hello, hello.
There we go. See, okay, maybe I should have done you first, and then we got there. We got there, everybody.
We got there in the end, but I didn't want to, dissuade the audience in any way. I didn't want to confuse them. I could put on a British accent if that is up to your taste, but it's not very good.
We'll skip that. We'll save that for later.
Oh man, I'd like to see that.
Here, I'll tell you what. Damn it, Zaid! I was just about to start bartering with Max to make him do an American accent, and you just gave it away. Come on.
Yeah, he gets it free for the first time. The second time, he's got to pay. He's got to pay.
In the back half of the show, we might have to trade some accents, and we'll see what happens. But of course, you two are here joining me today for an episode I'm very excited to jump into, which is, of course, our Spider-Man 2, Marvel's Spider-Man 2, I guess I should say, review in progress. So we are here to talk about one of my most anticipated games of the year. I know, Max, you were very hyped about it when we talked about it on Nintendo Noise last week. And Zaid obviously was very into it because he's already 100%ed the game. He's already rolled credits. All right.
I got this bad boy too. I mean, I don't know. I kind of like
Venom.
16. You're missing 3. It's 19 whole inches of Venom.
Oh my God.
I just wanted to point this out. The coolest thing about this is I have a lot of figures. You can tell in the background there. I have a lot of statues. I'm a nerd like that. The coolest thing about this one is that Spidey, Peter Parker here, he's connected by a single web of plastic.
That's really cool.
There's no how some of those statues will come, there'll be like a stand behind them to prop them up. There's none of that.
Like the early Amiibo piss stands.
Yes.
Link had that awful yellow stand.
That piss yellow stand. That makes me nervous that all it's going to take is one accidental dusting mistake and Spidey is zipping off. I'm nervous.
It's PVC.
We got duct tape. Yeah. So it'll be pretty, and it's on the top. It's not really near anything. I just took it down to showcase it for everybody.
And we're gonna have an unboxing of that I'll get posted sometime this week too. So shout out to Zaid for that one as well. So you guys can go check that out. I've got mine to the right to me over here. I haven't opened it yet because I've been too busy playing the game. So let's chat about it.
Well, I have a big question to start off. Actually, if Zaid has beaten the game, and we know that now, Pete, how far are you into the game?
Okay, yeah. So my in-game percentage, right, is at, I believe, 20 to 25, somewhere in that range as of last night. I would say I'm probably no more than a quarter of the way into the game, right? Like it feels like I'm early in the story for where I'm at, but I have spent a decent amount of time doing side stuff. Like I've gotten a good chunk of the map filled out already. I'm most of the way through like the Sandman side quests, which if you're playing the game you'll be familiar with. So yeah, I think if I'm 20% of the game overall, I would imagine I'm a little more than that into the story, but I guess it's tough to say because I have spent so much time diving into the nitty gritty of the side content because it's that fun. What about you, Max?
I looked this up just before I came upstairs. I've been ill the last couple of days, so I sort of spent a lot of time at home. And I've managed to complete 57% of the game.
Okay, cool.
And I've played in total, including the weekend, about 20 hours apparently.
Very nice.
So yeah, so I'm pretty decent chunk in, and like you, I think I've tried to sort of do as much of the side content as I can as I'm going. I'm trying not to sort of blast through the story. But
I was joking about it with Zaid offline while we were waiting for you to jump on the call, where I'm like, I already am feeling the like, I don't want this to be over yet. Like I want to take my time with it, because I'm not to bury the lead. I'm loving this game, which is I should come as no surprise to anyone. I loved the first two, but this is so far anyway, like everything I've wanted out of the sequel, right? Where it's more, but with a lot of refinement and it's a lot of meaningful additions to systems that were already good, right? Like stuff like the wingsuit, stuff like the ability to like skid across the water and stuff like that, the additions to the map. Those are all like I think obvious, quality of life or just growths on the formula stuff that plays well, and like I think is exactly what I think most fans were probably looking for. But
Mhm.
also just man, like as a lifelong Spider-Man fan, right? Like I've got my Miles Morales. I love Marvel pin on here, right
Mm.
here. I love Insomniac's Spider-Man universe, and I love their like the amount of care that they have for the legacy of their own universe, if that makes sense. I just got to the introduction, and I think you both will be able to know what I'm talking about. It's a new type of side quest, where it's a character from the previous games and the DLC, and they're now back and they have kind of a new
Yep.
role and
I know what you
a new
mean.
identity. And I was like immediately had that moment of like, man, like I am so excited to see this character and to see where their story's gonna go, and like having those that's the best thing about serialized storytelling, right? And like superhero storytelling is like being able to build on the legacy of what came before and establish characters and then take them in new directions or
Mhm.
grow them in ways that, leverage the care that you have for them in a way that like makes the story, even greater than the sum of its parts because of the investment that you've already put in, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the only one that's finished the game. And just to piggyback off of that, like I think like something that we've been seeing, especially from this releases of 2023, because I see it in every game I've played this year, is like it is the game of references. It is the game where if you are a fan of this franchise, if you are a fan of Peter Parker, Miles Morales, Spider-Man as a whole, this is probably the game for you. And like if we look back at like 2018 Spider-Man, it probably felt like that because the game looked gorgeous. Even for 2018 PS4 standards, the game looked next level. So like when we get to Spider-Man 2 5 years later, it feels like it's not like that jump from like a 2D Mario to a 3D Mario. It's just this natural progression. And that's like you mentioned, like with serialized stories, you build and you keep building until you eventually reach that bubble point. That's why the MCU has been so successful, is because everything was crafted to that larger narrative. And while this isn't exactly the same way, we always know that the main consistency in the narrative is Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, Miles Morales, aka Spider-Man, is going to be involved in some way. How do you keep that interesting? How do you keep like because like at this point in time, like how many superhero stories have we seen in games about actual superheroes, about
Or
in
even
games
just Spider-Man, right? Like Spider-Man is well-worn territory in video games, you
Yeah.
know?
exactly. Exactly. So how do you keep it interesting? Because like I don't know about you guys, but like these big AAA games are moving in that direction of like they want to feel like a movie. They want to be a film like experience. And they're like
Oh, yeah,
this
that's
ties
really
into that it ties into that argument of like, oh, our game's an art form. And like when people see a game like Spider-Man, it is embracing the art form aspect of it, right? But at the end of the day, like we're people who like playing video games because we like to have fun. And it's still like it captures everything. It encapsulates everything you want from a $70 product, something that you would expect. And it was great. Yeah, it was like I don't think I've obsessed about a game this long in quite a while. We're to the point where there's 24 hours in a day. I think Saturday I played for 12 hours.
Hmm.
So,
Bringing
you know,
immersement for sure. What about you,
exactly.
Max? How have you
So,
been getting on
what I
with
say,
it?
I'm very much enjoying the game. I think moving around the city is incredible. I think like that whole element of it is perfect, right? It's so tight, it's so fluid. All the additions like the glider and the wings or whatever, that all feels fantastic. And the fact that you can blast at full speed across the whole city over the bridge, and the PS5 never has to think about it or do anything. That's very impressive, and it
So
feels
it's so wild how
really next gen, right?
how fast it feels.
Hmm.
Yeah, because of that like lack of loading and like I've not had like stutters or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
the momentum you're able to achieve feels so wild.
Oh yeah, it feels incredible, right? Which is why I'm quite disappointed with a lot of the side content because it doesn't in any way utilize that very well. I don't think all of the side content that I've played so far, I've done quite a lot of it. has been combat, 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 combat. You go to a place, you do some combat. You go to another place, you do some combat, and the reward is slightly different. But I've only yet found one side piece of side content that involves the all of the new additions about with the gliding and the speeding around and there's no races. There's not been much in the way of like oh, we need to get from A to B quite quickly, and it's like, well, I'm Spider-Man. There's maybe like a couple of missions that have done it. I think
Yeah.
I've been quite disappointed that a lot of the side content, and this was exactly my problem with the first game, is a lot of the side content is it's just fighting. It's quite repetitive, and I think while I'm loving all of the, a lot of the stuff, like I've said before, about all of the movement, about traveling around in the open world, what's actually in the world has actually disappointed me quite a bit. Not to mention I've had quite a few bugs and sort of glitches that have sort of marred my experience a tiny bit. I'm loving like the main story. I'm loving running through it. I just think that I'm playing the side content purely so that I don't speed through the story too quickly, and I'm sort of getting a bit annoyed with like I don't know if you guys have. I don't want to. Can we talk about the Mysteriums? Is that too far? Is that too far in as a piece of content?
We can talk about it, but I think let's save that for when we get to
All right, fine.
like the spoiler light section. I want to keep
Okay,
it
fine. All
uh
right, fine, 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 fine.
as
Then
surface
I'll
level here as we can, just
yeah,
to
that's
save
fine.
people.
Then yeah, I'm having a really great time with it. I appreciate the story. Now the story is the fact that we know what's going to happen hasn't really taken any of that away from it for me. Like the fact that it is so far, it's been from what we've seen from the trailers and from what we've played of it, very classic in that it's a story about Venom, and we know the Venom story, we know the Black Suit story, and it's sort of doing that, but it's doing it with unique twists and interesting ways that I enjoy that I obviously won't get into.
That's
Um,
Yeah, that's something I definitely, without talking about the mechanics or the minutia too much, that's something I think they've done a really good job of
mhm,
in general with the Spider-Man lore, is like honoring it and hitting a lot of the beats that I think fans, like longtime fans like me, will want to see, or will want to at least, um have talked about or acknowledged or
mhm,
whatever. But they do such a good job of subverting those things, and like, not necessarily making the stories like filled with twists and turns in a way where, like, I think if you know the story, like, you can probably predict what a lot of the major beats are going to be, which, like, fair enough. It's an adaptation, but doing it with characters in different roles, or like having, like just having the simple presence of Miles in the Venom story makes it a totally different story. And like, I really dig their ability to kind of breathe new life into, stories that I consider classics, right? And
mhm.
that, like, I do know well enough to want them to subvert them a little bit, at least, and I think they do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're doing, it's familiar enough, but also different enough that while I'm playing it, I'm not like, okay, and then they do this and then they do that. And I think, yeah, having the addition of Miles and having that relationship folded into it all is very interesting. I do feel like Miles has been a little bit sidelined for the sort of main plot. And that while he has his own stuff, where I am right now anyway, I feel like I'm like, give me more of the Miles stuff
That's
as
interesting.
well.
I'm obviously earlier in the game than you are, and I've felt like I've spent most of my time with Miles.
Okay.
Um, so I wonder
Yeah,
if
interesting. I wonder
that's
how I'd feel at your time actually, where you are. I wonder if I feel the same actually. But
yeah, I don't know. It's
hmm,
tough to talk about without getting into the spoiler stuff, and
yeah.
we can do that in the back half of the show once people have
I
had a
mean, we're
chance to
talking
do it.
about it. This was the biggest. I mean, I don't know if you want to say it's a feature, selling point, or whatever you want to call it, but this is unprecedented territory, fellas. We're getting two Spider-Men in a game. I mean, we have
Well,
two Spider.
real quick, let's not forget Shattered Dimensions on the Xbox 360, in which you played as
Yeah.
4 Spider-Men, okay?
That's true.
So,
That's
all
true.
right,
That's
so,
true.
no,
That's
in
true.
all
That's true.
seriousness, it is a big change. I like it a lot. I think that generally, um, when they established Miles as a character in 2018, and then obviously you got the spin-off game and everything, uh, this is kind of where I was hoping things would go, that we would get this like almost like GTA 5 type
Mhm.
thing where you could just switch between them, and sometimes you're doing Miles missions, sometimes you're doing Peter stuff, but then you can kind of tackle the overworld in whatever, percentage breakdown you want. It's working for me a lot, like, I like both of those characters, and I think my biggest, like, trepidation with Miles at his introduction, and like as he's grown into a character in his own right, is like, was that fear that he would replace Peter. And I like that generally we've kind of found a way to have our cake and eat it too, where it's like, Peter can be in his late 20s or early 30s or whatever, and like, or maybe he's a dad or whatever, and he can deal with those more adult problems. And you have Miles to tell the more like classic teenage Spider-Man stories. And I very much appreciate that this game is kind of letting me get both of those flavors where it's like,
Mhm.
I'm helping out this kid with their promposal, or like I'm, helping them make like a recruitment video for the AV club when I'm Miles. But then as Peter, it's like it's dealing with the job stuff. It's dealing with, like uh a certain character coming back and how that's impacting his life, and dealing with the fallout of spoilers for 2018 of May being gone, and
Yeah.
him taking on her home and trying to balance a mortgage. And it's like that um that breakdown like works so well for me. And I love that the way that they show off different sides of the city too, right? Because like they know different people, they live in different parts of the city, they have different like communities around them because they're different ages and like different races, too, right? And it's like I think they've found a really good way to bring the two of them together and make them feel like a team and not like Miles is Peter's sidekick, even though he's his protege. And I just really dig that. I dig the whole master and apprentice thing they have going on, and that like they feel more like partners though than like, he's the Robin to his Batman or whatever, which I
Yeah.
dig, like I think they've done a really good job of uh taking Miles and building him up over time.
So I feel like what you just said there about them having sort of a chance to build Miles up over time, I feel like all of the things you said about Peter's side of the story, job, Aunt May, the house, all that sort of stuff. I feel like that all gets breezed by so quickly, and that they're mentioned, and then there's no time um for the repercussions of that to really sink in before the next thing happens, and it's all okay, or like they sort of move quite quickly. And I feel like that's
Or like
actually
we're
been
focused on the next thing that's happening.
yeah, like it doesn't give for a game that spends a lot of time introducing a concept and then doing that concept again and again and again, like, oh, it's another Sandman thing. Oh, it's another Sandman thing. It feels like it really wants to move on from every story beat really quickly. And I think you might notice this a bit later on, Pete, from where you are right now. But like characters will say things or revelations will happen, and then everyone's just like, I'm immediately okay with this, and this is absolutely fine, and this is what we're doing now. And then the
Yeah.
next thing will happen. And I know there's a limited time to tell that sort of story, but I remember the last game, I remember thinking, we have so much time here to talk about Otto Octavius, this whole build up, this whole relationship they create, that when the inevitable happens, you're really so invested in that. And I remember saying when I played that game in 2020, it's great to see a Spider-Man story that doesn't have to be told in 2 hours. A Spider-Man story that can be told, it doesn't have to introduce the character, introduce, Aunt May, introduce Uncle Ben, kill Uncle Ben, blah, 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 introduce a villain, all that stuff. It doesn't have to do all of that in 2 hours. It has an entire history of Spider-Man already built up, and now we're just living it, and we're able to,
Yeah.
it respects your time as a fan of the story that we already know, right? It
It
respects your
understands
time.
that most people have some familiarity with the
Exactly.
character, and
Yeah.
we don't need to
Yeah.
do the origin story again,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah. Whereas this game I feel like is jumping so quickly. The fact that I'm 57% of the way in, and um it's already just like, oh, that thing that I thought was gonna happen, that happened ages ago now, right? I don't know if anyone else feels that way. Dave, I don't know you've actually beaten the game. I don't know if you feel that way, but I feel like there's never a chance for these repercussions, for the things that happen to have effect on things before the next thing's already happening. How do you feel about
That
that?
that's true. Also, but like I think like it's different with Spider-Man. Like I think it's different in this universe when he can do everything a spider can. Like, and then you're playing the game, and I know uh, when you're playing the game, and I didn't have fall damage on. I know that was a big deal. Pre-release fall damage on or off. I had it off because I didn't change the setting. And you could jump up from you're at the top of Avengers Tower, and then you yeet yourself off and you fall, and you're completely fine. Like the realism of it is a little bit taken aback. And like again, like I'm not trying to, and this is like obviously no shots at anybody, but like Spider-Man has never been the deepest, right? Like he
Mhm.
obviously
wrong.
tackles
Proves that you
he
don't
tackles
read.
he tackles very emotional things. I don't read the comics. He
He
tackles
can't
very
read,
emotional.
Pete. Leave him alone.
I know. That's why you're on a video game podcast.
Exactly. This is where this is how it's the buildup. We've been talking about the buildup, and here we are.
You're like, I don't know,
yeah,
man.
no,
Yeah, the cartoon for children that I watched, wasn't as deep as I wanted it to be.
obviously I finished the game, so I already know what's going to happen. And like going back to what you said about Otto Octavius, like if you're a fan of Spider-Man, that name rings a bell as soon as you see it,
Yeah,
and you
it's
know what's
loaded,
gonna
right?
and you know
Oh, yeah,
what's
you
gonna
know it's
happen,
gonna
but it's
happen.
not about the destination, it's about the journey. It's about
Totally.
Yeah.
like those
Totally.
little moments you spend with Otto, and like you get like you guys have played the game. I'm sure a lot of people played the game, so you guys understand. But like those little moments, like I think the biggest strength of the Insomniac Spider Verse is the fact of how they're recontextualizing every single character, whether it's the hero. That was Mary Jane ever a bugle writer, or was she ever a reporter before this? Like I don't know.
In the Ultimate Comics, she's a reporter. Yeah,
So there's a reference right there. Like
it's like
Norman Os-
amalgamizing a lot of different things
exactly,
and
Yeah.
and like
doing
I'm
something
obviously
that's its own.
I'm talking from the perspective of someone who's seen like the cartoons, the shows, I mean the movies, right? And like for us, Norman Osborn is the head of CEO of Oscorp. And he is that in the MCU in the Insomniac games, but he's also the mayor, which I'm sure is a reference to another comic or another story in the
Yep.
Spider-Man universe. So it's like the fact I say recontextualizing, I should rephrase that, but it's more like it's
No, I think
reintroducing
that's
us
right, though. I think you're.
it's
Yeah.
reintroducing us to these characters in a way that doesn't feel like bloated. Like I don't need to spend an hour-long mission figuring out why Norman Osborn became mayor. Like I don't need to know that information. He is mayor. That is what we know, and it's important because of this reason. And then boom, you keep moving on. I
Mhm.
think that's the
It
biggest
trusts
games.
you. Yeah, it
Yeah,
trusts you to
this
like fill in the blanks.
Yeah,
exactly. And like you could obviously I wanted to ask you a question, Pete, because you probably know this. Into the Spider-Verse, 2016 it came out, the first
I
Miles movie.
think it's 18, isn't it? 17.
I thought it
Maybe?
was 60. If it's
I'll look
18,
it up. I'll look it up.
either way, my buildup is like having played these two games, I think Miles is my Spider-Man.
It's
Like I
2018.
Miles is like tied in with those two movies, which are literally some of the best movies to ever be put to screen. Miles's
Hard agree.
presence in this universe is it's refreshing. It is that innocent energy of Spider-Man that I'm not taking shots at any of the actors that like you might not have gotten from the MCU, you might not have gotten from the Raimi trilogy. Like the PS2 game, I think it's called The Amazing Spider-Man or The Ultimate Spider-Man, one of those two. Like the raw energy of Peter just being a kid is something we've almost never had put to screen in the movies because like they do it, but
he's
it's not
30
the
years
same.
old at the beginning of the movie, even though he's
Exactly,
supposed to be
right?
a
Like
teenager. Yeah.
exactly. And like I think Miles brings that presence, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it comes from
Totally.
everything he says. He doesn't say, "Yes, I'm going to help you." He's like, "Oh no, man, I got it. Yo, I got it." And it's things like that that make it feel like it goes back to that simple thing of like, is Spider-Man cool? And it's like, this is the if like there's a doubter, this is the encapsulation of what you want. Because Spider-Man might be a nerd, but he's also a badass. And all those emotions and that energy is put together in such a nice package that, like you guys have mentioned, I mean, load time's non-existent. Have you tried fast traveling in this game? Like
I did it once, and it took. It used like it. Yeah,
It's
it just
nuts.
happened. Yeah,
And it's like the fact that you can just drop a pin anywhere now, and it'll just be like, okay, there you go. It's
you're in
awesome.
that. You're in that specific spot. Like
Yeah.
I thought I was like, where am I going to appear? And it was exactly where I wanted to be, and I was like,
Wow.
okay, that's really impressive.
It's nice. And
It's
like I don't really use it because it's just so fun. Like, Max
to
said,
move
right? Like,
around.
the traversal of the is just so good that it's like you'd
Yeah.
rather just move. Like you'd rather fly there because
Yeah.
it's fun. But yeah, Max, I to take it back to your question, like I feel like that's kind of the challenge of like video game storytelling sometimes, right? Like when you have something that is like where like the conduit for story is like cutscenes or dialogue. Um like there's only so much time that I think most people want to spend on like like how many shots can we have of Peter like sitting in his apartment or at his house like emoting over his mortgage struggle before people are like,
Mhm.
I want to get back to the game, you know?
Yeah, but I guess
Which
you could do something like I said earlier about the side content. You could do something about him having to earn some extra money doing side stuff. Like, do you remember in the Spider-Man 2 movie game where
Yeah.
you
You're
deliver
a
pizzas?
photographer.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
Photographer
that's
deliver pizzas, have him do stuff like that as, like,
but I
some
mean,
of the
like,
side
that is a
content,
thing in this game, right? Like, the photography, that is the
That's
thing, right?
true.
Like, you send the thing to Robbie, and, like, that's
But then
ostensibly why
Miles can
he's
also
doing
do
it.
it. And
Yeah,
Miles
you're
can
right.
also do it, and, like, if it was more like, "Oh, I'm doing odd jobs," as opposed to take a picture in each location, if it was like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I need my lawn mowed." Is that right? Yeah, I need my lawn mowed, and, you can go, "Cool, I'm now doing it as Spider-Man, and I'm doing it in a fun way," just mix it
yeah,
up a bit that also is like, "I need money," or, you know, there are ways to do it that aren't just through cutscenes, and I liked
totally.
in the first Spider-Man when you find the backpacks. Not that I enjoyed the finding backpack as a chore, I didn't enjoy that very much, but I liked that every one it was like, "Oh, this is like when I fought Rhino," or, "This is when
I
I fought
love the
Vulture," or, "This
storytelling
is
of that,
Scorpion," blah,
yeah,
blah, blah. But this game doesn't have as much of that. This game is a lot more telling, not showing, because all the collectibles are, you know, not to sort of spoil anything, but most of the collectibles are just references, to
sure.
other Spider-Men or other characters in the universe, not specifically the one that we're playing in right now.
Yeah,
So I do think there is like a disconnect between where like I'm playing the main story is basically all the story I'm getting, and everything else is or and and the side stories, but everything else I'm getting is just like surface level. I'm not getting all these little references. It's not fleshing out the universe as much as the first game sort of really, really fleshed out the universe and built that universe. Um, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that's just how I felt playing it.
I think, I don't know. I think I see the point you're making, and I think I have reached a different conclusion from, like, the same observation. Because like, I think there have been other things that have filled out the universe in ways that I like, where, like, there have been main story beats that have, done that, and we can save that for the back half, I guess, because it's earlier-ish stuff, but maybe we'll save it for the spoiler cast at the end of the year, that we're gonna do too. But, so yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I think that some of that has been moved to other places. And I do agree with your observation though that like a lot of the side content feels more similar to itself. And I wonder if that wasn't a response to players and like people complaining about some of the like more chase oriented missions or some of those things, because I do remember playing that game and then, like, trying to platinum it and playing it a second time and platinuming it a second time, and some of those being, like, the more tedious missions where it's like, "I don't wanna chase this drone," like, I would rather do another, base or something like that, right?
I feel like
And
you can go too far the other way, though, right?
I think you're right, though. I agree with you because I feel that way about the powers too. Like, the
Hmm.
gadgets have all been changed and they're all mostly fine, but I miss some of the other ones and like I
Yeah.
miss the stuff that was more um like stealth oriented too. And like I feel like they've kind of more made it now where well any mission you can kind of take as a stealth mission rather than having like specific stealth challenges.
Hmm.
And I kind of miss that variety.
Tell you what, I will say on that, the web line has made stealth
Love
not
that.
it's made it bearable, because before the stealth stuff, it's like, okay, cool, it never reached the levels that, like, Arkham games did, where it's like, I'm swinging between point to point and I'm able to pick people up, blah, blah. It
Oh,
felt
I
very much like I
disagree.
was
I loved those, man. I
ah,
got so into them, like, trying
well,
to
now
get the platinum on each one and
well, I
everything,
like
and,
them
like
now because of the web wire. You can sort of
yeah,
string up like a spider. I can make my web, and I can then use that to pick people off
totally.
and send people over and stuff. And I find myself not using the gadgets very much in the normal combat, but I use them in the stealth combat. I just
Mhm.
yeah, when I'm doing the normal combat, sometimes I think there's too many buttons to remember to know exactly what I'm doing sometimes, where it's like, okay,
Mm,
cool, I'm pressing this, but wait, which of these four gadgets does this, and or which of these things have I got equipped to my abilities?
gotcha.
Um, so for the gadgets, I just tend to not use them unless I've got time to
I don't
in
know.
stealth go, okay, cool, I'm using this one. Bang, the enemies have been dragged together and stuff like that.
I
Um,
kinda like that innovation, like, I feel like I liked that you had more options in the first game in terms of, like, you had the wheels so you could have a ton of stuff, but,
mhm,
like, I do think it's kinda cool that they've made everything, like, more shortcut oriented. It
mhm,
kinda reminds me of, what I liked about the combat in Final Fantasy 16 earlier this year, where it's like, the game very much becomes the rhythm of, like, okay, like, jump in, get a combo off, dodge, fire an ability, or use an item or whatever, right? Use a gadget, and then like wait for the cooldowns to come and like rinse repeat, right? And it's that was something I really liked about the combat in the first game is that like, if you're just gonna go in and like make it a slugfest, then like, yeah, it can be button mashy and like that is what it is, right? Like, I don't know, I don't think that's inherently a bad thing. Um, but like for me, the challenge and the fun came from like wanting to get a combo every time and being like,
Mhm.
what's the highest combo I can get, right? And like I'm gonna try to get through this whole fight without taking a hit, and like getting into that the almost like rhythm game quality of it there. And like I think it is cool now that everything is kind of down to like 2 or 3 button pushes rather than
Mhm.
like having to pause and switch what item I'm using and like having all these things that would slow combat down. I do like that. And I think that adds to the like I talked earlier about the speed of the game, and like I feel that in combat where it's like you're firing at 60 FPS and it's like you're just darting around them and just feeling like an absolute monster knocking people
Mhm.
out. And like I think that having all those abilities and gadgets mapped to like the face buttons or like the directionals like does make it you spend less time in menus. And I think that that's overall a good innovation, even if I am I think it in some ways is an overcorrection in the same way you pointed out with side content, where like I feel like it has made the combat feel more like a slugfest because there is less of those abilities where I can be like, use the impact web and just immediately like shoot a guy to a wall,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
you can still do that, but like most of it is oriented around hits now rather than like, or like use this one and it pulls everybody in a circle so that you can use another ability on them, or like it shoots them up in the air so that you can yank them down, right? And it's like
Yeah.
you had those things in the first game. There was like the anti-gravity thing, there was this, there was that, but like you could use them in a way that was like I think a little bit more like chaotic and like a little bit more just like, you know, almost like more creative rather than being like how does this lock into the very tight like combo oriented uh gameplay.
Yeah, I should ask, what difficulty did you guys play on? I played on whatever the hardest was from default. I think it's amazing. That's what I'm on.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm doing too.
Well, yeah, I'm playing whatever the default one is. I didn't turn it up or down. I just left it as is. So
Okay, so I think that's just the normal mode. I don't even
Normal.
yeah,
remember.
yeah, I was playing it on normal mode. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I asked just because like I think this is probably, I mean, playing on amazing. This is the only time I ever really died. I mean, I in preparation for these two games, I had played them previously, so I just like did a new game plus and I put it on the hardest difficulty. And like 2018 and miles were just not really a challenge.
Yeah, I didn't. I
Whereas
didn't.
I've
I don't remember dying much. I haven't died in this either.
No,
yeah,
I don't think
I
of
got
them
my
as
ass
being hard games at all now.
I got my ass kicked quite a few times in this game. Like not like I got like Dark Souls level, but like there were times where I
Yeah.
was just a little like I didn't dodge at the right time and I got fucked for it. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah, especially
and it's
earlier on when you don't have as many abilities and you don't have like parachutes that you can like, oh, okay, I have no health and my back's against the wall. Let me use an ability, let me use a gadget or whatever to like interrupt the flow. It's
Yeah.
easy to get like ganged up on for sure.
yeah, and the I it's funny because you guys were mentioning like the Spider-Man of it and the what is it? The Spider-Man of it and like like just how it feels. And I think the most important thing, sorry about that. I think the most important thing is the flow in action combat in a game. Like you mentioned Final
Totally.
Fantasy 16 and like that's my barometer for how you achieve flow in an action game. Like
Mhm.
everything like you press R1, you're dodging right away. You do your like you have like a set of skills that you can line up and if you plan for it in the middle of an action where it's all split second decisions, you can get the exact combo or whatever you want to go off. And it's like Pete said, I want to chase that high of seeing a 250 hit combo. You know what I mean? But on the flip side, and you guys aren't the only two that I've seen say this, like Cosmonaut Variety Hour on Twitter said it, where he was just like, yeah, the gadgets kind of suck. They're like not Spider-Man gadgets. They kind of just feel like an action Devil May Cry game as opposed to a Spider-Man game. And this was before I had played it, so, like, I was a little worried, but, like, in practice, doesn't really feel that different to me personally, and also, like, I just think, like, because I think it's the best of the 3 combat systems, the amount of options you have, the how stylish it looks, the new additions to, like, the finishers, the biggest key addition that actually added a lot of challenge to the game, and I think it's a good balancing thing, is you can't just heal when you have focus. You have to have a full bar of focus to heal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The biggest change that completely changes just how combat goes, because now instead of just constantly healing yourself when you take any damage, you have to plan and you have to strategize around when you heal. Is it worth it to heal or use a finisher? Like now it gives you that like mental game you have to think about while you're making these split second decisions. And like I said, like that's what, in my opinion, at least action games are about, is just keeping that flow going. Like, how can I take this one punch and evolve it into 50 punches? And what's going to happen in the middle of that? And then what am I going to do once I finish it? And it kind of ties back into why I mentioned the two Spider-Men before. It's because like besides the story, they're kind of the same, but they have a few key differences between them. Um, and it doesn't really change the gameplay entirely, but like those little differences, that's more what I meant when I asked like who like how do you feel about it? Because like those little nuances, kind of like I'm talking to my brother about it who just picked it up, and this is his first video game in like a year. And he's like, "Yeah, I like Peter better. He feels like heavier and stronger." And I'm
Mm,
like, "I love zipping around with Miles because it makes the
Sure.
combat way more engaging. More hits, but more style, if that makes any sense."
yeah, I mean, I like the way that both of them play, and I liked both of their previous outings, so it's like I think they feel close enough where it doesn't feel like you're juggling two control schemes, and there's enough nuance that like it keeps gameplay fresh, you know?
I think
Yeah.
it helps that a lot of the abilities are quite similar. You hold down L1, you press square, you're doing some sort of punch, right? Whether it's
Sure.
the I won't spoil it, but of the two attacks, or I guess maybe not at the very beginning, but it does sort of later on. Or you press the circle and you're smashing down, you press the jump and you're jumping up. It's they're very similar. It's just the effects. Whether it's the venom effects that Miles has, or Spider
Symbiote
Man's
stuff.
claws, or the symbiote stuff, or whichever you've got on. So I think it's quite easy to move between the two. And I was going to say earlier that is there any way they could make the characters slightly more different overall that would maybe make them feel more unique, because they do feel very similar and they are both, they both have very much the same power sets and you don't want to completely lock things out. But
Yeah.
but when I'm swinging around, the only reason I really would want to swap between two characters is if I come to a piece of content that requires another character, I'll swap, and I don't have a preference in who I'm swinging around as because they can do very much the same things.
I think that's probably for the best, because I think that way, like, you let people play how they wanna play and, like, who they
Mhm.
want it's like Steve and I were talking about this on Nintendo Noise this week about, like, the Mario game where it's like they made the choice to make everybody play the same, right? And it's like
Yes.
that has advantages and drawbacks, but I think, like, when you're trying to have a game where you're seamlessly switching between 2 characters, like, I think you want them to feel pretty similar,
And
unless
also it's the first try. Like it's Insomniac's first at bat at putting
Sure.
two in the same game. So I think first game blues, and I don't think it's done perfectly. Like I would obviously like Miles to be a little bit more distinct than Peter, but like I think when the game is that fun, it's something you kind of overlook while you're playing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
like
but
and it's
it's
like I
also just
said,
like,
I think
how different are you gonna make them? Like, it's like they have the same powers aside from the fact that, like, Miles has invisibility and he has the electricity stuff,
Venom.
but it's like yeah, but it's like, how what, do we want him to start, like, firing electric shots all over the place? It's like, that's not really, like, how he fights, that's not really, like, how Spider-Man moves, it's just like, it's a Spider-Man game. You want it to feel like Spider-Man, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
there's nuance between them, but, like, I think you can only make them so different before it gets jarring at a certain point. But
I think that's good on the spoiler free stuff where
yeah,
we're
yeah. We'll we got a lot more Spider-Man talk ahead of us. But if you want to go in fresh, I think now's your time to jump off. I think it's safe to say all of us recommend that you check out the game. I think it's a must play. I think it's definitely one of the games this year that I would recommend to anybody. It's one of the ones that you're going to want to be up
it's
on.
got the sauce. It's got
It's
the
got the
sauce.
sauce. It's got the
Yeah.
sauce. That's true. So we're going to talk more about Spider-Man 2 in just a second here. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of FlipScreen Games Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of October. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobi, Pilkey, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Waka Hula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You all the realest to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to write in for the question block, just like folks did on the back half of the show, if you want to show your support, just like those Patreon folks did, if you want to keep the conversation rolling between episodes over on Discord, guess what? You can do all that and much, much more by heading over to our website, flipscreen.games. Go over there, click on some stuff, however you choose to get involved and show your support. We thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Flip Screen Games podcast. All right, we're back.
Thank you.
Let's jump into the question block because we got some folks writing in. First question comes from our own Chewy Plays Nintendo on the Discord, who said, "Is it 2 spider, 2 man?"
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
That times 1,000.
it is. Yeah, I think you nailed it, Chewy. I can't think of a better way to describe it than 2 spider, 2 man.
Yeah.
This next one comes from our very own Steve. Got all the co-hosts writing in
Who?
today. Yeah, some British guy. You know
I
him?
don't know.
No, you
No,
guys don't know each other?
I know everyone in the UK. I just don't know who this
Interesting.
Steve. Nah.
Okay, Steve. Yeah. So he says, is Spider-Man being intrinsically linked to New York City detrimental to the game? And do you think Insomniac can or will pull off a 4th game in the same setting, or will they move on to other franchises like they're doing with Wolverine? Yeah,
I'm
go
gonna
ahead.
quickly say that this could be any city. It's just buildings, and I don't think it needs to be much more than that. It's just buildings. It could be anywhere. Like there's a point in the story where you're sort of given a hint of something else, and I was like, that would be quite cool if we were to do that. And then I thought, well, that's just more buildings, and maybe less high buildings. So maybe it'd be even like worse. I think it's hard to change things up unless they've mentioned Madripoor, and I know that Wolverine has a lot of link to Madripoor. So if they were to do like a Spider-Man game set in Madripoor, and maybe we actually get some just like completely brand new architecture and a whole new design, and sort of like how Gotham can sometimes be like New York, or it can just be like a completely weird gothic, city full of gargoyles and things like that. If they were to sort of introduce Madripoor as like this, I don't know, futuristic-y, slightly interesting architecture, it's more, not quite what we're used to, but there are still buildings and there are still, recognizable cityscapes and things like that. Then
Sure.
yeah, I could see that happening. I don't think that if they released a Spider-Man 3 and that it was still in New York, it would be that much of a problem. I'm pretty sure there's still more stuff to the west that they could possibly link in. Actually, my geography of New York isn't that
Yeah,
great,
no,
but
I can't remember. I'd have to look at the map. But yeah, I don't think the entire city's playable yet.
yeah, get Spider-Man to the
Um,
Jersey Shore.
sure, right? Why not? But yeah, I don't think I don't think it's a problem at all, right? Like I think when you talk about we mentioned it in passing earlier, right? That like the history of Spider-Man in video games is super well worn. They've all been set in New York, and that's where Spider-Man is. That's where
Mhm.
almost all of his stories take place, right? And it's like he is absolutely a character that you can take and kind of put anywhere, and like I'd be open to that. I'd be open to a game that like, is maybe more jet setting and, wants to go to other places. But at the end of the day, yeah, like the swinging doesn't work unless you're in a city that's super skyscraper oriented. And
Yeah.
not that many cities are large enough to do that and portray it in a way that's dynamic and interesting. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think they will pull off a 4th game easily because I mean, there's also a lot of things you can do to make it feel fresh, right? Like we've done 3 games. I don't think that those 3 games all feel like they have the exact same map, right? It's like to me, it feels very reminiscent of the Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom question, where it's like, how are they going to breathe new life into this map? It's like, oh, about a million different ways, right? Like
Yeah.
it's, Miles took place in winter, right? So like everything felt totally different in that game, even though it's
You were like what, relegated to like just Harlem and then maybe a bit
no, it's
like
I
you
mean
were
it's the same map as 2018 more or less, but like it's just it's
doesn't
got a
feel
new
like it.
it's got a new coat of paint. And it's like, and also to your point, there's stuff that happens in 2018 that affects parts of the city. And like that also is a way to change it up, right? Where it's like in this game, there's huge parts of the game where like I've not been in the part of New York that I've spent the last 2
Mhm.
games in DLC in, right? Like,
I
so
do feel
it's
like a lot of the new stuff doesn't feel like new stuff though. It does feel like more of the same, but that's because it's a city. What can you do to make a city not a city? But like there are parts where like there are also times where I'm running around Queens and I'm like, wish this had some taller buildings that I could be swinging around. But they also have done stuff with like the train tracks and the way you can glide through all of the slipstreams to or the wind tunnels that
when
you don't necessarily need to be swinging around buildings sometimes. So it's nice to sort of mix it up in different ways. Um, I do worry though in terms of the content if they just go like, cool, okay, we're gonna do what we did in 2. We're gonna open up the west side. We're gonna have it's the same city at its core, but there's more either side. I think they need to because it feels like that even though the city's bigger, there's probably a similar amount of content overall from the last game. Um, Possibly even less now that the crimes are optional. Like the crimes are a lot more like, oh, you can ignore them, just move on. You don't have to go to them.
well, I
And I
mean,
wonder
it
if
depends on like I mean, I guess it depends on what you're trying to do, right? Like if you're just trying like you can just main path the story, but like if you want to upgrade anything, you need to do that stuff.
oh, I've not done
Yeah.
a single I've not done any crimes. I've ignored all the crimes.
I mean,
Oh
But
wow.
maybe I should be doing the crimes,
yeah, I
but,
mean, like, you don't
I mean,
have
if you
to,
want to
but
get like some of the like, I maxed out all the skill trees. I maxed
yeah.
out all the
yeah,
tech
I'm
parts.
at the very last one of all of the skill trees at the moment.
Oh, okay, perfect.
But
Yeah.
to
And
like
I
get
just haven't done the
all the
crimes.
suits and everything, and like to get the
I bought most of the suits as well. I genuinely haven't touched any of the
This is
crimes,
crazy.
and
how are
Okay,
you
I just
maybe.
getting how are you getting your city tokens for
from
the tech
finishing the
parts?
content, I guess. Tech parts you just find in the little chests around the city,
Yeah,
or
they're around the city.
the side, like the sort of
Huh.
major side quests. The stuff. So I've completed like 6 of the districts, and I haven't touched a single crime because they're not relevant. They're not
And
relevant.
also,
They're
yeah,
not necessary anymore.
when you finish an area, so like the first time you get it, you're gonna get 2 of the Spider-Man logo tokens, the hero coins.
Right.
Mhm.
Then when you get to the middle part, after like exploring it in terms of progress, you'll get fast travel to that
Mhm.
area. And then once you get it all the way, you get another 2 hero coins. So if
Well,
he's
the first one's not even hero coins. The first 2
It's the
are
rare tech parts,
rare
right?
tech,
oh, rare
which
tech
rare
parts,
tech
not coins,
again are
yeah.
also in caches dropped around the city. I'm finding
Sure.
like
Yeah.
2 of those at top. I'm finding, there's just things dotted around that I don't need to engage with that content because that's like really repetitive. And it's just like, I remember like I did 4, when I started doing the crimes, when I started playing the game, I was like, oh, there's a crime, I should go to it. And I did 2 car chase crimes and 2 fire crimes in a row. And I was like, I just don't want to have to keep doing this. So I just didn't do it. I didn't
Yeah.
because the game no longer has like complete these 3 missions to finish this. And there's so far I've
Yeah,
not seen a
yeah. You don't
trophy
have
that's
like a
like
checklist to
all this
do
stuff.
anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Which it means I get to play more how I want to play, which is to not engage with that stuff because it is
Yeah.
the same thing every time. And I'd rather engage with the stuff that is like a token on the map that I can come back to later, or just because I don't like swinging around in the games. Like there's a crime happening. I'm like, well, now I have to go and deal with this. I'm like, I can ignore that and go and do what I'm currently doing which the token stuff lets me do. So I'd rather just engage with that, and it
I
hasn't
think I,
affected me detrimentally in any way.
I think that like touches on something that I think the game is like it's very worth praising for, which is like it's super player friendly. Like
Mhm.
there are a lot of quality of life changes that are like super uh have what is the most fun or most easy way for the player to engage with this, and that's what they did. Right? Like that's
Yeah.
what feels like the bottom line choice that they were chasing at all times. And I think that's I think why these games have such a wide appeal is that like they really are, you know, I think they do a good job of kind of hitting all the notes that you need to hit, right? Of being fun, of having heart, of like, trying to minimize frustration and maximize enjoyment in a way that is like, you know, uh, really artful, I think.
And to answer Steve's question, I guess from my perspective, I did want to bring up a quote from Brian Intihar. I hope I pronounced
Intihar.
Intihar. He is the creative director at Insomniac Studios, and obviously, if you didn't hear, PlayStation Spider-Man 2, Marvel Spider-Man 2 is the fastest selling PlayStation exclusive on PlayStation 5. It set a
Deeply
record, I think,
unsurprising.
2.5 million sales in the first 24 hours and 3
Correct.
overall for the entire weekend.
Yep.
And as of today, before we started recording, the Metacritic score is also not, it's not slouching either. We have a spot on 9.0 user score and a 90 critic score, exactly the same.
Very solid.
So I mean, if you look at that, I'm just using that as just kind of like a basis for my point to agree with you both. I don't think it's exhausting. And I also think and I'm just looking at it from the perspective of someone who likes Spider-Man. Like Pete mentioned, you're gonna want to go to New York. I think Spider-Man in any other environment, especially if it's a game fully focused on him, like it's okay in a movie like Civil War or something like that because the focus isn't on Peter. He's
Yeah,
just the successor.
in an Avengers story, great, take him to space or whatever. But like
But like when
Spider-Man
it's
is a New York character. He's a New Yorker.
And if you look at the MCU, like probably Spider-Man has probably gotten the most character development besides Tony Stark, and if that even. And like when you look at that, it's like that's what you expect from a Spider-Man story. You're gonna expect, especially in a game that's like 20, 30, 40 hours long, you're gonna expect to have a moment where Peter's kind of shitting on himself, or Peter's thinking to himself or talking to himself, having that moment of I need to remove myself from the Spider-Man persona and get back to being Peter. And like I said, I think New York is just a good spot for that. It's where he is historically. Um, and also like I don't think any of us like obviously we like the more space and we like the extra areas and like, oh, Queens is cool to go to. But then when you go back to Queens, you're not going to be saying that every single time you go there, right? By Miles Morales, the city of New York would probably get boring for a lot of people. But I think it goes back to what I was saying about the rules don't necessarily apply to Spider-Man because you're not there for the city, you're there for the swinging. You know what I mean? You're
Well, it's
not
like
Yeah.
there.
there's different stuff there too, right? Like it's like the things you're doing are not the same, and like the characters that you're interacting with are not the same. Like, you know, the just the total difference in like vibe of like Craven's hunters versus like Silver Sable's you know, folks, or like the, you know, Hammerheads guys or whatever. Like there's such a different like just feel because of what's going on in the story too, you
Yeah.
know? Like
Yeah,
New York is a big place with a lot of personality. Think of how many movies or whatever you've seen that take place in New York and you're never like, "Ah, another movie in New York." You know,
Yeah.
it's like it's just
exactly.
not it's it's a very good blank palette, you
Yeah,
know?
and it works for the story they're trying to tell. Like
Totally.
all this, it reminds me a lot of JRPGs taking place in the city of Tokyo. And I think a joke I've made on another episode is literally like, man, they really got to give the city a break. The amount of apocalypse this place has gone through is. But like when you really
Well,
look at it, like
you
where would
didn't
if I were
you
to
didn't read your quote though.
what was that?
You brought up you said you wanted
Oh,
to read the Brian Intihar quote
thank
and
you,
then
thank
you
you.
got on your you did but you got to read the quote.
So he said, when asked about a Spider-Man 3, Brian said, I think if Marvel Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales were our Iron Man, and Spider-Man 2 was like Civil War, where logically do we go from there? I think it'd be pretty epic.
What does this mean? Because I've seen this quote all
I can
day today, and I've been
translate.
thinking about it. Because but
I
what
can
I was worried that what I was reading was like it was like a spoiler for the end of the sort of the story, and I was like, why are they talking about this already? But
No,
go on, translate.
I think he's just comparing it to the MCU, right? Of like the
Well, I
original one
understand
is
that.
like our introduction thing. Now we've had our kind of like escalation story. You know, that was like many people looked at Civil War as being like, oh, this was the first one that was good, like critically. You know, like it upped the ante in a way
Like
that
Captain America 2.
that's that's. Oh wait,
No. No,
That's
it's
Winter
not.
Soldier.
tripping me up. You're right.
I think he's talking about it like when you look back at the MCU, like you look at three movies, or I guess four technically, but the last two count together, in my opinion. You look at Iron Man, 2008, the movie that started it all. Civil War is where like the collabs in the MCU really became its own thing. Like
Mhm.
not only did Spider-Man show up, but Black Panther showed up in the MCU for the first time too in Civil War.
Sure.
And then
That's true.
for him, I think what he's teasing is whatever, if we go ahead and make a Spider-Man 3, it is going to be our end
It'll
game
be
Infinity
bigger.
War. Like I think he's not talking about it in terms of like where he's going with the story. I think he's just like, well, if we look at the first two games as Iron Man 1 where we really got started and
Mhm.
we look at that's what I think he's saying.
Yeah, I think he
I think
means
that's
like in scope, right? Like
Okay.
it's gonna have to continue to escalate,
and its
right?
place in pop culture. And its place in pop culture. Like when you think of the first two Spider-Man games, he wants you to think of it the way you would think of Iron Man 1 and stuff like that. And I think
That
that's
makes
what it is.
sense.
And basically, like, I guess my point overall is to end on this question before we move on is like, can you? I guess I would ask people who are sick of New York City, tell me a city where Spider-Man would work. I've
I
been
don't
to LA. The skyscrapers aren't that big.
I don't think people are sick of it. I don't really think that's a commonly held opinion, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's like I think it's a environment that, like, creatives have been fascinated with for a long time, and, like, it's kind of hilarious when you think about how at the center of the world New York City is in the Marvel universe, you know? Like, a lot of superheroes in the Marvel universe live in New York City. So it's like that's the other thing, right? Is like as they do branch out to stuff like Wolverine, like we could get into stuff where it's like maybe the X-Men are in the next game, and then that is a thing that makes it feel fresh again. And you can like always find a new thing to make I think to freshen up the city and make it feel like it's a new map all over again. Because like I don't have that feeling this time around, right? Like I'm so
No.
focused on what's new that I'm not like, oh, I've been in this neighborhood before.
I'm moving too
Yeah.
fast through the map to notice that it's the
Right.
same.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's just like,
I want to.
okay.
I want to ask you guys both this, and before we get to the next question or whatever topic we're going to get to next, I wanted to ask, what fidelity mode, what
Oh,
gaming
performance.
mode did?
Performance.
But there
Yeah.
was that other
Absolutely.
option.
I'm all performance.
There was that other option for the 120 hertz.
Oh, like VRR. Yeah, I don't have a 120 hertz or a VRR
I have
TV.
that
I got
I
you.
have that turned on too because I do have a
That's
VRR that goes up to 120. So yeah, it's awesome. I can't believe like I said, man, the speed
Ooh,
of this game is nuts. Like I've had moments where I'm like, I can't believe how like frenetic everything feels, you know? Like it's just that like it's so zippy, you know?
yes,
And like
yes,
I mean, it really enhances that feeling of just the way that Spider-Man moves, you know? Like he is such a fast character that is about like like, like you said, right? Like there's like the pull lines and everything like that. Obviously the momentum of like when you're swinging and everything. And then like how natural in evolution the gliding feels, right? Where like you can get that really big circular swing and then shoot off and it's like, man, like it it's nuts how well this game holds up technically and how
yes.
well it like keeps up with how much shit it's loading that you're just flying by. And like I haven't, I know Max, you said you ran into some technical problems, but like I've not experienced any like pop in or anything like that. Like I'm
No, I've not had
consistently
that.
impressed by how much it can, you know,
Load in
uh
1 second.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, I've
and
not
then
had a
like
single problem with that.
all the windows have ray trace like they've got reflections off of them. Like, I
In
can
the
see
performance mode,
inside
in the
the
mode where you're supposed to
buildings.
in the mode you're supposed to be compromised. I played on performance
Yeah.
mode too with the 120 hertz on. Um, in the performance mode where there's supposed to be quote unquote compromises, right? Like I turned my TV setting menu to just to see what's going on, and it says 4K 120, like locked. You know what I mean? So it's like for me, I'm probably this is pretty bold because there's been a lot of Sony exclusives that have been gorgeous, but to me, we're 3 years into this generation. This is the first game, and I haven't played Starfield, so I can't comment. This is the first game where the generation, like, feels legit to me. Like, obviously, like, the way it looks and all that stuff is nice, but, like, I'm coming from PC. I haven't had to deal with loading for 10 years, you know what I mean? So to go back to a game or a system where that's present is kind of annoying. This is the first time, Pete, and you know me, Pete, you've known me for years. You know I'll spend money twice on the same game on different platforms. This is the first game I'm not because we know it's going to come to Steam at some point since the other two games have. I'm not getting it on Steam. I have no reason to. I
Well,
literally have no reason to get it on Steam.
And let me pull in. This is our next question from the question block. Chris Gabe one over on the Discord wrote in and said, "Is Spider-Man 2 coming to PC?" Yeah, I mean eventually, for sure. I'm
It'll
sure.
probably take a year.
Yeah, it'll take a
Yeah,
couple a little while. Miles Morales was pretty quick, but yeah, I
yeah,
imagine that has to happen.
yeah. I
Yeah.
would imagine 2024 at the earliest, 2025 at the latest.
The game
Yeah.
does like the games really, they always do well in the charts whenever it's like the
It's
Steam Deck.
Spider-Man.
These are our most played games. Yeah, Spider-Man, it does really well. I just wanted to quickly jump back to what you said about the visuals. The opening of the game, I was like really like, is this really like this is this doesn't feel next gen at all. The very opening, like the opening segment and a little bit after, I was like, why is this? The characters look weird and the sound looks really rubbish. And I was like, I'm really disappointed with how this looks. And then I was sort of swinging around in the daytime and I was like, why does this look so flat? And then as soon as it sort of like starts to get a bit darker and they start to move the time later in the day, I was like, okay, this looks really, really good. And then as soon as you start realizing that there's no loading and stuff, yeah, it does feel next gen. At the start, I was remember texting a friend of mine and I was like, how are we 2 years away from Returnal and yet that game still looks better than the latest Spider-Man? I was so confused by this. I was like, how have they not sort of done it? But then since then, I'm now, the speed you move around, the way you can get around, all the different things. I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. I do think it is weird though that the fact they've managed to perfect that, not a single glitch, not a single bug. I'm gliding around smoothly. I'm swinging. There's no loading or whatever. How I still have like really weird clipping errors, or the floor just disappears while I'm fighting someone, or I get trapped in a bit of scenery and have to restart the thing. It's like it's just so weird that we can
Yeah,
still
that's
have
funny.
things like that with
I haven't
such
seen
a
any of that.
I might
oh
have
man.
had more technical issues than both of you. Like I had that once where I had to like hard like reload my save where I
Hmm.
literally was swinging and I swung into a building I wasn't supposed to
Yeah,
go into and I couldn't get out. Like the camera wouldn't move, so I had to quit. And
yeah.
then it crashed on me once.
I've had 2
Um
crashes, like 2 hard crashes, like, where it's gone doo-doo, and it's, like, kicks me out, and I'm like I was like
Really? That's
yeah, I was
crazy.
right in the middle
Yeah.
of something. I had one where I was doing, like, a fight, in, like a fight challenge, and there was, like, what is it that you guys call them? Um, like, the nosebleeds, where, like, you sit on
oh
the
Yeah.
stands or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
There's,
yeah,
like,
the
one of
nosebleed.
those. Yeah, yeah, I was trapped inside one of those, and the enemies couldn't reach me, and I couldn't reach them, but I know I was walking around, and the
That's
time was
funny.
ticking, and I was like, "Alright, that's over then."
Yeah.
Um
The only thing like that I've run into is, when you are swinging, if you hold square and then you move the directionals, you can like do the little tricks.
Yes.
Mhm.
I had the like when you finish it, it'll be like great combo or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Like I had that like just stay on the screen one point,
Hmm.
and I was
Oh.
like, oh, that's weird. Like I'm sure it'll go away, and like I triggered a cutscene and it was still there, and I was like, okay, let me reload the game. But like that's the only
I've
like rookie
seen
thing I've
people
run
have
into
a
like that.
I've seen where people change the costume and the costume makes Spider-Man or whichever Spider-Man you're playing as just a white square, and then you're just like in the tofu mode from, Resident Evil 2, where you play as Rock Tofu. It's just like that, you're just like a white block swinging through the
That's
city
so
without any
funny.
animations or anything like that, and obviously there's some little things they've got to add because it's still still a week from release. There's going to be things
Right.
people are
Yeah.
picking out now they never picked out before.
Sure.
But yeah, I just think it's just such a weird juxtaposition between like this ultra smooth, ultra crisp, flawless, this feels next gen stuff, and then like it's the same problems that like PS2 generation games have, where it's like, oh, I'm stuck in a bit of scenery, and I'm just like, and stuff
The
like that.
more things
Things are just
change,
always
the
going to
more
be in
they stay
games.
the same, buddy.
Exactly, exactly.
Awesome, man.
Uh,
Well, we're definitely going to talk more about Spider-Man in the weeks to come. I think for me, it is definitely on my short list for game of the year. It'll definitely make an appearance in my top 10. How high it ends up being, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a must play. I think anybody should pick this one up, and it's
this is
well
a
worth your
system
time.
seller. This
Yeah.
is the system seller. Like I made a video on Final Fantasy 16 on my YouTube channel, which you should go check out, and I'll do the plugs at the end too. Um, and that up until Spider-Man, which was only 4 months to highlight how crazy of a year 2023 is for video games. For me, that was the system seller. That was the game that when a friend comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm getting a PS5. What's the first game I should get?" Final Fantasy 16. And then like irrespective of whatever type of gamer you are, Final Fantasy 16 was my go-to recommendation. It has everything that you expect from an next-gen console on top of the things that make it an amazing video game. Spider-Man 2, I think kind of just stole the crown. Like convincingly so. Not and it's my I'm not going to get into we're going to talk about the game of the year stuff later. I don't want to get into that too much right now, but I think when you look at everything that it is technically, what the game is itself, and you look at just kind of like as the exclusive, I think that's the one. I think this is the one. I think this is the one where it has everything. Like when you ask a casual person what Spider-Man story they like the most, they're gonna say Venom. This has the Venom storyline. Who's your favorite Spider-Man? You don't even have to pick, you get to play as both. Like, you know what I mean? Like it literally like I don't think I've ever seen a game besides technical issues that we've talked about come out that has been as airtight as Spider-Man 2 so far, at least.
Insomniac doesn't miss, you know.
Are we just talking? We're just talking about on the PlayStation, right? Because
Yeah.
I could reel off like Nintendo EAD, like Ian, like
Yeah,
Mario
yeah,
Wonder, for
yeah. I'm
example,
talking
I'm
like
crispy
thinking,
perfect.
yeah,
I'm
PlayStation
thinking like
exclusive.
when you think like
All
that
right, okay.
next gen, like you're
I mean,
expecting
I
4K.
think there's other games on that list, but I think Spider-Man
Oh
2
yeah,
is
yeah. But I think like if it's not number one, it has to be in contention for
yeah,
the
I think
spot.
that's fair to
You
say.
know what I
I
mean?
feel
And
like
it's like
Ragnarok
the
was bang on perfect. Like I don't
Definitely
remember having
agree.
a single. I've had less issues in Ragnarok than I have had in this game, and obviously
That's
they're doing
true.
different things.
I think this is a game
But
that appeals to more players probably though, you
yeah,
know.
Yeah.
And partly
Spider-Man.
that's because of the IP, but it's also just like
yeah.
I think these games are like so that you mentioned Nintendo EAD, right? And I think Insomniac like has a similar ability to tap into that like pure essence of like video games are just supposed to be fun, you know?
You say that, and then they do weird shit. Like they just keep doing handbrakes where they're just like swing, 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 swing. But now you have to ride a bike for a bit,
Oh
or
my
now you
god,
have to
wait, you
walk
wanted to
around.
talk about the Mysterio thing. That was the
Oh
first dude, the first one where you're as Miles with the DJ set.
yeah,
I was like, what the fuck is this?
yeah. I
Why
was
are
like,
you
it's so
it's so
long.
Where's
slow
that?
It
and
doesn't
long. And you're
stop.
just like boop, 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 boop.
Yeah,
It's just
It's
yeah,
like
I
the
get it.
same.
And
It's the
then for it to
same
be
combination. There's no variation between the
that it's
combos.
yeah.
like, man,
And then for it to be
they
a
love
like
that shit.
a fake out and it's just some fighting. I was like, why did it take like an entire song to do that? But then when I go on.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say for then every single time I went to another Mysterium, I was like, all right, cool. What fun minigame are we gonna do now? And it was just combat. And I was like, no, we've literally moved outside of the realms of reality, right? We're now in like Mysterio's virtual reality. Anything could happen. We could be in any location, and we're just in the same sort of similar locations fighting. This is the perfect opportunity for you to have me falling infinitely down as trains come at me and I'm dodging things and stuff like that. This is a good opportunity to relive that Miles and Black Cat mission from earlier in the
Sure.
game. Do weird, crazy shit like that at me, but instead I'm just doing fighting. But it's like you can't get hit this time. If you get hit, you'll get less rewards. And it's like you've. Uh, I've been holding that in.
Specifically that the first Mysterium that you
Yeah.
do, where you do the DJ thing. I'm putting 100% of the blame on Final Fantasy VII Remake because they had that shit for the wall market section where
Sure.
Don Corneo is supposed to pick you, and they have a whole like, and it's longer and it looks way better,
Ugh.
but like we don't need random rhythm games, and you know what I mean? Like obviously I put the word blame, but I'm just trying to emphasize the point.
Insomniac loves to make you play a little fucking mini game. They love that
Oh, they
shit.
love it, and it's
They
just
love it.
like I just don't care enough about being a bee, or I don't care about riding a bike through Central Park, and the whole time I'm going it, I'm clipping. I'm riding along and I'm clipping the floor, and I'm trying to do a jump, and
See,
I get
that
stuck
didn't
in the
happen to
jumping, and I
me,
go,
and,
That
like
didn't happen to me.
see,
oh,
and it's like,
so
that to me,
janky.
I liked that bit, right? Because to me, like, that is where the game I meant to bring this up when you said the thing earlier about, like, letting the story breathe. Like,
Mm.
those moments work when they work, and when
Not
they
with
don't
Harry. I don't mean with Harry, by the way. I mean there's a separate solo mission
yeah,
where
yeah, yeah.
you just
I
have to
gotcha.
ride the bike. Okay, fine. All right, fine. Carry on.
Okay. See, that I haven't done yet. I was talking
No, yeah,
about that bit.
there's a separate like submission where
Okay.
you just riding a bike through Central Park and it's like gotta test this bike out and I'm riding the bike and it's like clipping and it's like, let's do a little jump. And you do a little jump and it's really anticlimactic. And he's like, whoa, that was cool. And it's like, you're telling me it's cool. That didn't feel cool. It feels slow. And then it's like, whoa, you gotta be quick because it's gonna blah blah. And I'm like, I don't feel any tension here. I feel like I'm just riding a bike that every time
Yeah.
you know, I'm just
Yeah.
like I'm like juddering or I'm clipping. But also
It's
like
so funny.
there's certain things that I feel like if they were to work exactly as they're supposed to work, it would be cool. And I say this about and now I know that you've all done it, the Mysterium stuff. Just after that, when you're in the fun fair, I'm not going to spoil too much of it, but nothing worked for me. When it's like hold the controller up and press X to cheer, I'm holding the controller up and then I'm putting it down, and then Peter goes, and I'm like, no, because I wanted to, or I'm pressing extra cheer, and like I'm on this roller coaster, and I'm pressing extra cheer, and everyone's just silent, and then he'll go "Nah," for a second. I'm like, no, because I want to be involved in this. I want to be like going woo and like pressing the X button, and like I had Kat sat next to me, and I was like, we're gonna go on the roller because she said to me, she's like, can you go on that roller coaster? I was like, I don't think so. And then like the next mission, I was like, Kat, I think I'm gonna go on this roller coaster, and we started going. And I was just like, "Oh yeah, let's go woo," and put my hands in the air, and then just we just went, and I was like,
So
"Come on!"
funny.
Like it just like none of that stuff would work for me, and it really like it's it takes me out of that. Like I understand you want to do things to give yourself more chance to, like you were going to say, characters to talk to each other, give stuff room to
Yeah, like
breathe. Like they can have this stuff,
let the beats
but
breathe.
when that stuff doesn't work, it's just weird. Like I don't know. Have you? Did either of you when you put your hands up in the air? Did Peter go
Oh
woo
yeah,
and like
it just worked.
just
So like,
didn't
but
work?
yeah, like if I had that experience, I'm sure I would feel exactly the way that you do, right? Whereas
Yeah.
like for me, I was like, okay, this is all kind of I I felt like the bike ride worked
Mhm,
really
mhm.
well for me. The
With Harry, I agree.
Yeah. The Coney Island stuff felt like missed
It was a little
opportunity for
much.
me
It was a
because
little
it's like
much.
it's a
Yeah.
lot and there's not enough dialogue there to justify it.
Yeah.
Like if
And
every
variety.
Yeah, like if
Yeah.
every one of them ended with like a oh, like one of those flashbacks, like when they're in the school or
Yeah.
like then I would be all in for it. But like you hit a point where it's like I'm just going on these and playing like a cutscene, and it's like
And
Yeah.
also I'm ticking these boxes for no like every mini game. I thought that at least the mini games would be different, but most of the mini games were aim, shoot, aim, shoot, and that worked perfectly, which is why I was so confused. 'Cause I was like, "Oh, maybe my controller's broken," and then every single time I was aiming and shooting, I was getting greens, perfect. I
which
was
is
doing
so funny
perfect. It
because
was just
that's
as soon as I
actually
had to
a
do
system. The button where you had to press a button to do a thing wasn't working. Like that's so weird.
yeah. No one was going woo. No
Works
one was
totally
going. No
fine
one was
for
going in
me.
the air. They were just like it was just like sat there, and then
Yeah.
like characters behind me were going. They were going, "Oh, isn't it funny that Harry's net with this girl?" Blah blah blah. And I was like, "Okay, cool. We're going down the big thing. Let's put my arms in the air." And no, we're just gonna go. It's just like yeah, just like a brief
That's so funny.
second.
That's funny.
It's
That's
like
funny.
there's an image I really like of like I think they use it in comedy quite a lot where like someone's on a roller coaster and they are either they're just like so scared that they're just completely like deadpan going around it,
Yeah.
or that they're passed out and they're like everyone around them is going woo and they're just like I love that, but this felt just like yeah, just like
Yeah.
really, really tonally weird.
It's a little yeah, that's
Yeah.
awkward if it's just not triggering the way it's
Yeah.
supposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and it's like
there's been a few times like that where I'm doing like a like there was the very first of the uh Emily May things where you're like, oh, there's plants dotted around. Like that just felt Spider-Man's very good at doing big broad movements and big swings and big jumps and things like that. As soon as I have to gently crawl around picking up plants off a thing, my character's just like
A little much.
like jumping
I
around,
Yeah.
know.
swinging
Yeah. It's
And
around,
it's
and I'm
like
like,
it's
oh
always so funny because it's like it is so that like when you're moving at this high speed and you're doing something complicated, it's so elegant,
yeah,
and then he lands and it's just like "Doo, doo, doo, doo." It's like he's
yeah.
Yeah.
like a person who's never picked up something before.
Yeah. I'm like, "Oh, there's a little icon here that I can see and I wanna go and get." Like, it's a beacon that I wanna
Yeah.
get, and I'm like, I'll run up the wall and I'll just fly past it because 'cause I'm pressing triangle, and I'm like, "Okay, cool." We're like, "Okay, I'm swinging past it. I'm gonna press triangle now and grab it," and I'll just open my wings and just glide away from it. I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, let me just pick up this thing I wanna pick up, man." Like, it's not very
Yeah.
good at doing the minutiae, but it's good at doing the big, broad strokes, and I think it's very good at that.
It's
Yeah.
very funny how Spider-Man is so similar to like every 3D Sonic game, except the fact that it's Spider-Man and they got
Mhm.
the swinging right. Like everything you're saying is everything I've heard just on the other side.
They're
It's like
so similar,
Yeah.
except these games are
when you're
good.
moving, it is some of the best video game you'll ever play. When you are at a complete stop, play something else. Like really, like in Spider-Man 2 on the PS2, when you how many times did you just like web crawl around the walls? I did that a
Oh,
lot back
yeah.
then. You can count on your hands how many times you have to do it in this game when it's not mandatory in the story.
Yeah, where it's just like, because you just run up the walls or, there's
You
other
do the thing where you
options.
pull yourself up.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You just
yeah,
like
yeah.
pin yourself to a specific point.
exactly.
Do you know what I like about Spider-Man 2 that this game doesn't do? You get to the top of a building, and Spider-Man 2 is like, "Here's a little token," and you go, "Cool, there's a reason for me to visit every building and get one of these tokens." Whereas this game, I get to the top of the Avengers Tower and I go, "I visited the top of the Avengers Tower. That's kinda cool." But, like, that's it. Whereas I liked there being like, "Oh, visit this location and get a token." Obviously, that would be a ball ache to do that 150,000 times or
Yeah.
whatever to go to the top of every building. But I like going up and getting a reward for it, or like, I like going up and doing something and there being a reason for it, not just I think that's like I've said before about how the world doesn't exist for me. The world doesn't matter to me as much in this game because it's purely just a reason for me to swing around doing cool stuff between missions. but it would be nice if there were more things in this, like where I could be like,
It'd
oh, I'm
be
inquisitive about what's over there, and I know that there's something over there, and not just oh, it's just like it's a building that I don't know because I don't live in New York or America.
it would be nice to see them take advantage of some of that stuff for, like, cameos, like,
Hmm.
I think it was, like, that was something I thought was really cool in the first game of being like, "Oh, shoot," like, they put Avengers Tower here, like, Doctor
Hmm.
Strange's The Sanctorum is on Bleecker Street, like, that's really
Yes.
cool, like, and it's cool to be able to go to those places and, like, have Peter, like, say a line of dialogue or whatever, but it would
Hmm.
be even cooler if, like, you get up there and it's like, there's an Avenger hanging out or something, or, like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
that stuff would be cool. But I think that might be leaning too hard into like you do that sort of stuff. You open up the you know what the fans are like. They're like, oh, that means we're definitely getting this game. And I feel like there's
yeah.
the specific mission I mentioned earlier where I feel like there's already been talks of like, oh, now we're
I
doing
mean,
larger stuff. It's
the
like we
thing
need
is
to do larger
though,
stuff.
I think if you just do that all the time, then it's you set the expectation that that's
That's true.
normal, right? Because it's
That's
like
true.
in Spider-Man Web of Shadows on the 360 and PS3,
Hmm.
right? Like there's a mission where like you meet up with Wolverine, right? And it's like not because there was going to be an X-Men game, it's just because well yeah, he also lives in New York, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like it would be
The
super
Amazing Spider-Man,
easy.
he's in there too.
Yeah, right? It's like it'd be super easy to do stuff like that where it's like, hey, like there's a nod in you mentioned the Black Cat mission. There's a nod where like you get a note from Wong, right? In that. And it's like that's the level of interaction I'm looking at, right? And like I mean maybe people are looking in that being like they're going to make a Doctor Strange game now, but it's like I don't know, like the
It's
Sanctum
one
was
note.
there, right? Like it's like
It's one note.
it's one moment, right? And it's like I
Yeah.
think you could do that with characters like Daredevil or Luke Cage or Jessica Jones or the X-Men or Captain America, or Iron Man, like the Fantastic Four, any of these characters that live in New York or are regularly in New York, and like a bunch of them are friends with Spider-Man. Spider-Man
Yeah.
is friends with many of those characters, and like you don't need to go like full on crossover mission. You don't need to go like too deep with any of it. But I think it would
Yeah.
be cool if, like, it could be like you go to the top of Avengers Tower and like you get a phone call from Tony Stark, and he's like, "What are you doing up there?"
Yeah.
Something like that, right? Like, like
Or even
just
just mentioning it. If he just says, "Oh, I hope Tony's not in," blah blah blah, or just anything really that
and
would
like they
make
do,
it feel less like just a set dressing.
yeah, and like they do have like the little throwaway lines here and there, like
Mhm.
but like it could go a little further, I think,
Yeah. I did.
and
I
like
finished Hell's Kitchen 100% earlier, and I was disappointed. Like when I got the thing, I was like District Complete. I was like, oh, there was no Daredevil at all. I'm sure if I was to
yeah,
look, I
like
might find the Murdoch and
you get Nelson and
whoever
Murdoch, right?
Nelson.
Like
I might find that
Yeah.
if I went looking for it, but like there, there's very specific collectibles that seem to have
yeah,
references to other characters and things. And I was like, it would have been nice if one of those was just a Daredevil one, where it was just like, oh
yeah,
hey, it's Daredevil, or just a reference like, oh I know a lawyer here or something like that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the last
Yeah.
game, I felt like there was a lot of that. This game, I feel like there's less of that.
One last thing before we close off today, fellas. I finished the game. I haven't unlocked all the suits yet because there's some that I just don't care for, but I've got my favorites. I've got my picks. You could pick suits that you might have seen. Which one so far? And you don't have to pick each one. Just what is your overall favorite suit? If it's a spoiler, feel free not to share, but if not, feel free to go ahead.
I mean, so far I'm just using the classic red and blues, like I got the a couple of my favorites. Oh, you know what? Right now I'm using the Superior Spider-Man one, which is another design I
I
really like.
used that a lot, and I
Um
didn't like that the eyes were black. I'd prefer it if because obviously I know that's the character, but like I was like, this
yeah.
is the best suit design, but I feel like a villain in the
I mean,
because my
yeah,
eyes are
it's
so
Spy
black.
though, right? That's
Yeah,
that whole story is
yeah.
Otto as Spider-Man. So yeah, it's like it is kind of villainous, but it's a cool design. I like the
No, it
Scarlet
is.
Spider as well with like the hoodie.
I
That's
love
another one
it.
I
The hoodie
usually
ones
go
are my
to.
favorite.
Yeah.
The hoodie ones are my favorite. Go ahead, Max.
I am currently because I'm at the point in this story where the black, Peter is wearing the black suit. I'm opting to exclusively wear the Raimi black suit because it's just so good.
Awesome.
You don't get like the black
Perfect.
webs and stuff, which is a shame, but
Yeah.
I am still in
Oh,
character. And for Miles, I'm using using the suit, the base suit that the game has. Because I don't really like many of Miles's suits, but I did like the one that you get at the end of Miles Morales, where it's like the Prowler suit. I can't remember what it's called now, but
Yeah.
it's like that sort of like
The purple, the green
Purple
with
Rain.
the
I think it's called like Purple Rain.
Purple Rain. Yeah, REIGN.
Yes, yeah, that one. I'm using that. I'd like to use that, but because it's, what I don't like um, is picking like the cool wacky suits that look really cool, look really weird, and then in the cutscenes when I'm supposed to like
Cutscene. It
invest
looks
in stuff, I'm
really
like,
weird.
Yeah,
That's
oh
for me.
yeah,
I will use them when I'm just like rolling around, but yeah, when it comes to cutscenes, it's like I gotta be in something regular here. Come on now.
I'm
yeah.
glad you guys are like I'm glad you guys are like that too. So for me, I I'm the same way, but like I don't like to go in the menus and change it. So I'm like, I gotta find two suits that I like that are canonical to the story. And a lot of
Mhm.
them aren't. And like the tell is the eyes, because the eyes do the MCU Tom Holland thing where they will react to based on what Peter or Miles is doing.
Yeah.
So for Peter, besides the times that he's wearing the symbiote, which by the way, in my opinion, I love the Raimi one. It was number one for a long time. The symbiote suit in this game is fucking crazy.
It's so cool. I
Shit's
like the way that it uses the elements of the. You know what? I can't spoil anything, so I'm not going to say anything. But
I just like the way that it reflects, like the
Well,
reflections and stuff.
no, no, no. I was just gonna say, yeah, I know you were gonna spoil something there, Max. Put a pin in it. We'll save it for the spoiler cast. Don't forget, you know.
Yeah, so the reflections, the way the lighting reflects off of it, it looks
Mhm.
and it's like a living, breathing thing, right? So it's
Right.
constantly like shifting a little bit, and like in the cutscenes, you could really see it well. So love that for Miles, and I don't think Pete has gotten it yet, and this isn't really a spoiler because it's not tied to the story. The Forever suit for Miles. I mean, come on, man, that is
Sorry, I
the
need to Google.
suit. The suit. That is
Oh
the
yeah,
suit.
yeah. It's
I
cool.
can cosplay as
It is a cool
Killmonger,
reference.
dog. I can
Yeah, that is
cosplay
a
as
cool reference.
Killmonger. And it's still like the eye shape is the same, like it's obviously different, but it has the same materials as like the
Mhm.
Miles suit does. So it's like
Yeah.
this is as far as I'm willing to go away from it. And also I think when he's doing regular punches, because his fingers have the claws, he's slashing instead.
Oh, that's cool. That is very, very
I don't
cool.
think it does more damage or anything. I just think, and it's like a couple of punches. It's not all of them.
Oh, I've just seen you can change the color of it. That's cool because I've been using. I didn't like it initially based on just the red, um, so the black and the red. But now I'm looking at the picture of it. There's actually some really cool options for it. I've not really liked many of the color change options for any of the suits.
Some of them are
Um,
so loud and like they're nuts,
mm,
but like they're a lot of fun. Like I think it's super cool that they give you like the colorway options and like you
Yeah.
get to kind of like, you know, I would think it would be cool if there was like the ability for you to play with them a little bit more, like and like customize them the way you want rather than having like a couple presets, but I get it.
It is what it is. The classic suit for Peter, I changed it from the red, white, and blue to the red, white, and black, just
Yeah,
for
mhm.
the story of the symbiote and stuff
sure.
like that. Ooh,
Also another
ooh,
classic look. You know, there was a couple people
ooh.
drew them that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Well
Yeah, I love
worn.
all the suits, but those are my favorite. And I just wanted, I
Yeah.
figured someone was going to ask next week, so figured we get it out of the way now. But I think that's it
Yeah.
on my end.
Yeah, well, we'll leave it there for today. I'm sure we're going to talk more about Spider-Man in the weeks and months to
Oh
come.
yes.
And of course, you know, we'll be back with a spoiler cast at the end of the year. We'll talk about Game of the Year later this year. So we'll have plenty more Spider-Man to talk about for sure. So make sure you write in if you have any questions about the game. If you want to talk about it next week, make sure you hit us with questions for the question block, and we will try to swing on back to them next week. So
Nice.
thank you, Max. Max, Zaid, thank you both for joining me here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me, as always.
And of course, remember, if you guys want to write in, if you want to get involved, if you want to check out one of our sister shows, if you want to keep the conversation rolling until next week, or if you want to go above and beyond and show your support over on Patreon, you can find links to all that and much more on our website, flipscreen.games. Go over there, click on some stuff, however you choose to get involved and show your support. We thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of the Flip Screen Games podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete, he's been Zaid, he's been Max. We'll see you next week.